Force will be with you, always.
Knights with shining sabres, a princess in distress, and a valiant young soldier with a mystical mentor. It's the stuff of legends and part of what makes the entire Star Wars saga so compelling. For beyond the wizardry and special effects lies a classic tale of good and evil.
What's this?
In the Star Wars trilogy, the filmmaker George Lucas was deliberately trying to create a modern fairy tale.
Who is she? She's beautiful.
I'm afraid I'm not quite sure, sir.
What's a fairy tale? A fairy tale is a story about courage for young people. Because throughout time, throughout history, young people need to know that courage can help them get through a wall of fire.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
The story of Star Wars is the story that has been told 1,000 different ways in 1,000 different cultures, but it's always the same about an innocent who's put through a trial and emerges a hero, and a hero is someone who becomes able to care for something larger than himself, able to give of himself, so his concerns are not personal and solitary, they become about a larger issue.
There was something on this journey that you're going to find. It's been called the Holy Grail, the Golden Fleece, the Ark of the Covenant in Raiders of the Lost Ark. The old word from the myths is the boon, that suggests a gift. It's the thing that is won on the journey that will change the world when you bring it back.
Vader was seduced by the dark side of the Force.
The Force?
The Force is what gives the Jedi his power. It's an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us and penetrates us. It binds the galaxy together.
What I got out of it was just believe in yourself. You know, the confidence was what the Force really was. Obi-Wan kept saying, go into yourself, Luke. Look, it's you, the Force, you know. And people say, well, it's God and this, that, and the other. But I just think it really means, you know, look into yourself and you can pretty much pull anything off.
A belief in one's own powers, especially one's own powers to do good, because the underlying morality of Star Wars is a very, very positive one.
And he had borrowed from Wizard of Oz or Kurosawa films, or, you know, he's just steeped in film lore. So it just sort of went through his pores, and that's how he imagines things. George has an extraordinarily visual imagination.
I thought he had reached something very powerful and primordial, and that part of the story, the human part of the story, was clearly going to work.
We got some T-shirts from George in the mail from the set that said Revenge of the Jedi on them. I still have them, and I hope to send my son through college with them when I sell them at the fan fairs in a few years. After I started wearing these shirts around, I saw George a couple of months later, and he said, well, no, we're not doing that anymore. And I said, why is that? What's the title? He said, Return of the Jedi. I said, what's the difference? He said, revenge isn't a Jedi concept.
Use your aggressive feelings, boy. Let the hate flow through you.
I think just from experience, you go out to try to be a good guy, and sometimes the good side doesn't respect you, or they turn on you. And it can really make you bitter. And you say, look, I've been trying to be good all this time, and you know, why? I'm not getting anything out of it, so let me just flip over and work on the side of evil. It's so easy to be evil.
You underestimate the power of the dark side. If you will not fight, then you will meet your destiny.
January 1997, the Star Wars Trilogy Special Edition. Stars and fans alike clamour to experience the film. Why is it that 20 years after its initial release, the appeal of this classic adventure is stronger than ever?
I had never been as kinetically thrilled about watching a world that somebody had created that I just wanted to exist in forever. It was really a pretty seminal event, and I think the lives of all of my peers and that entire generation, as a matter of fact.
This movie brought the movies to a different age 20 years ago, and I think it's going to be the same situation here 20 years later, because kids are really going to get to see what a real movie is like.
It's exciting. I never thought something like this would happen, but it's been a big thrill.
You don't need to see his identification.
We don't need to see his identification.
Move along.
Move along. Move along.
Since 1983, the Star Wars trilogy could only be seen on television. So an entire generation has grown up without experiencing the films in the way that George Lucas intended. The 20th anniversary of Star Wars gave him the opportunity to restore the films to his original vision.
Star Wars was designed to be a theatrical experience. It was designed to be on the big screen. Sound is extremely important, and it's very important to the overall enjoyment of the film that it be big.
Stop that ship! Blast them!
For those who have never seen it on the big screen, they have really missed the point of the movie. They really have missed the excitement that happens when you sit with several hundred other people and the electricity that goes through the audience when you see that movie. One of the things I wanted to do was preserve the film so that it could be a viable piece of entertainment in the 21st century.
What's that flashing?
Films, do deteriorate and they disappear. And I think this one had deteriorated a lot more than anybody expected in 20 years. At the same time, I had an ulterior motive that I'd been thinking about for a long time, ever since the films were finished, which is there were various things, especially in the original film, that I wasn't satisfied with. Special effects shots that never really were finished, scenes that I'd wanted to include that couldn't have been included for some reason, mostly money and time. I looked at the 20th anniversary as a way well, if we're going to reissue them, maybe Fox will go along with allowing me to refurbish them also. So they agreed to that, and that's really what started this whole thing.
In 1995, the restoration began with a concerted effort by 20th Century Fox, Lucasfilm, Skywalker Sounds, and Industrial Light and Magic. The task was more daunting than anyone expected.
The most obvious thing that's happened is we've gone back to the original negative, cleaned it up considerably, redone a lot of the optical effects, the wipes, the dissolves, and improved the quality of the film, because it was deteriorating.
Holding her is dangerous. Word of this gets out, it could generate sympathy for the rebellion in the Senate.
I have traced the rebel spies to her. Now she is my only link to finding their secret base.
The actual original negative was so far gone that unless we actually did this at this time, we were never going to have the film to be able to release ever again.
Darth Vader isn't black anymore. He starts out coming up to a navy blue and then getting brighter and brighter as the film continues to deteriorate.
There will be no one to stop us this time.
Yes, sir.
Part of our task was to take this negative and to try and just get the film so they look the way people remember them looking when they first saw them 15, 20 years ago.
So we brought in a team of film restorationists to start a full-scale film restoration. The first step was to take the original negative apart and physically rewash the entire negative. From that point, we realized that the opticals, which we couldn't rewash because the dirt was built into the elements, also had to be recomposited.
Compositing allows separately photographed items to be placed in the same scene. For example, the seeker ball, the lightsaber, and the chess pieces are combined with live action to make up one final shot in the film. Creating composites for the original release of the trilogy required film technicians to physically handle the negative. This led to wear and tear as well as dirt deposits on the final picture. Today, compositing takes place with computers, but before this technology could be applied to Star Wars, all the original elements had to be located. Some scenes had as many as 40 elements for a single shot, as was the case for the asteroid sequence in Empire. Normally, these elements are thrown away after the film is finished.
In the case of Star Wars and Empire and Jedi, all those pieces exist. That was due to the fact that George kept everything. So that gives you the ability to do this.
You're not actually going into an asteroid field.
They'd be crazy to follow us, wouldn't they?
Although Star Wars required the most attention, The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi had their fair share of technical limitations.
One of the biggest sequences we worked on Empire Strikes Back was the snow battle, the walkers and the speeders in the snow. All of that was done at a time that we used optical technology, of course, to do all that compositing. And a telltale sign that something's been optically composited is a black line around it. And when you have a sequence that takes place in outer space against stars, it's easy to reach a point where those black lines don't show up. But when you have a sequence that takes place against snow in the daylight, every hint of that black matte line becomes very visible. And so the first time through doing the snow battle here 17 years ago, a lot of effort went into finding ways to minimize that black line. One of the ways was to not print all of the elements at their full opacity.
All right, I'm coming in.
Consequently, when you see the snow battle on film, you may notice that there's part of the scenery is visible through the cockpit. And it was a constant trade-off of how transparent can we make the cockpit? At what point is the black line more objectionable than the transparency? And so there was an opportunity to go back into those shots, use the computer technology, and to eliminate all the transparency, but also not have any matte lines.
Another unique aspect of the trilogy is the sound design created in this unknown world.
We would be honored if you would join us.
20 years ago, Ben Burt set out to capture an organic array of sounds that would soon come to characterize lightsabers and droids. Now he's back, digitally enhancing the sounds that have come to define the world of Star Wars.
This is all your fault.
We didn't want to throw out the sound in the film and do it over. There were so many classic things in it. So many things that we couldn't do better. And they also represent what the film is and how it's known to people. So that we did our best to bring them to the audience as clearly and as high fidelity as possible now.
The whole company is based on the philosophy that sound is 50% of the experience. And one of the things that I'm most proud of is the work that both Gary and Ben have done in the remastering of the soundtrack, because the original mix was so complex, so good, but there was no technology to actually hear it. And one of the things that George has spent an enormous amount of money trying to develop is a THX system in which allows theaters to present films in the way in which filmmakers actually make them.
THX is, for lack of a better term, it's a philosophy. THX was something that George started back around Return of the Jedi when he developed a specification that theaters needed to meet. They had to use certain types of speakers and components that would deliver a certain performance to be called a THX theater. And for us, it's, it's a plus because you work, hours on end and doing these little nuances, and if it goes out into the theater that can't reproduce it, that the audience won't hear those tiny little things we've done.
Another advance in theatre technology is digital sound. All 3 films in the special edition have been remastered digitally.
The advantage of the sound being presented digitally is that you have 5 channels of sound. So we've redesigned the sound field in the film to bring more of the sound off to go around the audience. So a spaceship can fly from behind you and move all the way to another corner. You also can reproduce low frequencies much more effectively, so you can get a subwoofer, a rumble that's much more effective. Vader uses the Force, and there's a rumble, and we've made you hear that rumble now.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
Here they come.
I think we We have the music sounding much clearer now with the split surrounds. You can hear the whole orchestra and a lot of the nuances in the music that might have gotten garbled or a little buried in the original versions.
When we come back, we'll be looking at the trilogy's special effects and a few surprises for the future.